Do you have a favorite among the Federalist Papers?
I'm
not asking you to choose here between Eliza.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah. Yes. So I like a lot of Federalist papers. Federalist 78, of course, the independent judiciary, the role of the judiciary. Federalist 69, which says the presidency is not a monarchy, is very important when Hamilton explains all the ways in which the presidency is not a monarchy on our constitutional system. I think that's very important. Federalist 10, which talks about factions in America and explains that having the separation of powers and the federalism system, dividing power in so many different ways, would help prevent a faction from gaining control of all the power for the people of the United States. And that makes it frustrating at times because it's hard to pass new legislation, but that division of power helps protect individual liberty. I think that comes a bit from Federalist 10. Federalist 37 and 39 talk about, on the one hand, how we were just talking, Constitution over time can be, the term, liquidated by historical practice. What does that mean? That means that as the branches fill out the meaning of the Constitution over time with practices, those can be relevant in how the court subsequently interprets certain provisions. We see that in Dames and Moore versus Regan, for example. We talk also about the national and federal government. So the combination in 39, the combination that we have, this odd, that's the genius, right, of having a national government plus state governments, and then within the national government, the House is proportional representation, the Senate is state representation. That interesting compromise, which Madison, by the way, was opposed to, but that compromise at the convention. Federalist 47, which Senator Klobuchar mentioned yesterday, the accumulation of all power in one body is the very definition of tyranny. I start my separation of powers class every year with that exact quote that you read yesterday, Senator Klobuchar, because that's very important. 51, if men were angels, we wouldn't need government. So sorry, I've got like 8 kids.
It's brilliant, and I think that's a great greatest hits list. If these were on Spotify, I'd say you put together a list of those. Let's close in the minute and a half I've got left. I gave myself an additional 30 seconds because of the 2 interruptions there. Tell me how you were informed by Federalist 51 and how that relates to your role as a jurist. Your role as a jurist now on the D.C. Circuit, the role that you would play if you were confirmed to the United States Supreme Court. This understanding that government is an exercise in understanding human nature. If we were angels, we wouldn't need government. And if we had access to angels to govern over us, we wouldn't need all these rules, these cumbersome rules that make government so inefficient and so frustrating. Why is that important, and how does that affect you as a judge when trying to interpret the Constitution and trying to interpret acts taken pursuant thereto?
That's an interesting question, Senator. I think we recognize that we're all imperfect. First of all of us as humans are imperfect, and that includes judges, and that includes legislators, and includes all of us are imperfect. And so we recognize that in how we go about setting up our government. If there were some perfect group of people, we'd put all the power in that one body. But because we're imperfect, putting all the power in that one body would be, as Senator Klobuchar was saying, the definition of tyranny. So I think the way we deal with the imperfection while also having a government, because we're imperfect, is dividing the power, separating the power. And that, again, to my mind, that all reinforces why the framers, the genius, despite the flaws in the Constitution, and there were flaws, the genius of separating the legislative, executive, and judicial powers, tilting toward liberty in all those respects, and then having a federalism system where we still have state governments that can further protect liberty and be laboratories of democracy as well. I think all that is because we're imperfect and because we recognize the imperfections. It's also why we have things like a jury system. Even within the judiciary, we didn't trust a judge to do trials on his or her own criminal trials. We have or civil trials. We have a jury system to recognize, and we have usually 12. And that is designed to recognize that we're imperfect, and sometimes that's why we have group decision making. That's why we have 535 legislators. That's why we have 9 justices. We don't usually have one person, and so too in juries. So I think that all maybe stems from the same philosophical understanding that we're imperfect beings and that we divide power and that we make sure that no one person in a jury situation or other situations where our liberty can be affected is exercising total control.
Great. Thank you very much, Judge. My time has expired. I am not the chairman of this committee, even though I'm playing him on TV. I understand that under the previous order entered before he left, we're supposed to take a 10-minute break. We will stand in recess for 10 minutes.